Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Crossword Deep Dive. Today, I'm excited because we tend to feature a lot of the same type of crossover, but today we're going to discover something a little bit new. So my very special guest today is JooWan Kim. So JooWan, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
And you're going to talk to us about a very exciting new project, the Hip-Hop Orchestra and the Hip-Hop Orchestra Experience. Before we get into that, though, because you're a guest with us today, I do want to know a little bit about your musical upbringing, how it all started for you.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Korea. I came here when I was 20 years old to specifically pursue classical composition. So my background is all classical music. I majored in composition both for my bachelor's and master's. And towards the end of my bachelor's, I kind of wanted to get out of this so-called concert music aesthetic, and I felt that it was very alienating, and also the canons of classical music and the endeavors, the underlying notion that there's new language that must be basically invented by the composers and academic people, and then and then the public will like um, sort of adapt it as if it is some sort of like, I don't know, top-down sort of central planning. I really didn't like any of that stuff. And so by the time when I did my master's, I was pretty upset and dissatisfied with all the concert music sort of stuff. So to piss off my teachers, I wrote a piece that had, I mean, it starts like a chamber music piece, regular chamber music piece with what we call peer ensemble, which is normal sort of contemporary ensemble setup that actually promotes um, concert music, avant-garde compositions, which consists of Pierre Lunaire instrumentation, so flute, woodwinds, and piano, some percussive elements, and then singer. And instead of singer, or in addition to singer, I had that soprano. I added rapper and then um, drum set. So that began the whole process of what we do.
So two questions. First of all, how did you, as you said, your background was in classical. Was this something that you were listening to on your own outside of that formal training? Is that why you had an interest in rapping and hip hop? And then what was the what was the response from your teacher when they heard that?
Well, the response was as expected. They hated it, which was what I
Okay.
wanted, what I was going for. But surprisingly, the audience loved it, and then we got a big full page write up with a on a very respected newspaper, local newspaper. And then after that, my MC at the time suggested that we make an album. So I wrote like an hour of music, spending about 6 months, next 6 months. But I really didn't know hip hop at all. And mind you, I came from South Korea. English is my second language. Hip hop requires a lot of these kind of rhyme scheme, and then the rhyme scheme also has specific, you know, um, culturally specific things that's going on that was very unusual to me. So it was really for me to just give middle finger to concert music. That's why I did it. But then after I wrote these like series of pieces, um, I kind of had to think about what I did as a composer, because at the time and still now I consider myself as a serious composer. So as I was actually learning hip hop, I listening to hip hop as if it was some sort of contemporary repertoire, which I spent time. So, for instance, if I didn't understand a piece of like Ligeti or some of the canon pieces, I would actually listen to it 3 or 4 times and then jot down the things that I like about it, I don't like about it, and I will analyze it. And I actually gave same kind of respect to the hip hop pieces, and Mainly, I listen to 90s music and G-funk. Those are my bags. And it surprised me that I started getting. I mean, I still didn't like a lot of it, but incrementally I started getting some aspects of it, and I had a conversion moment when I encountered NWA, and I felt like I was dipped into the river of hip hop and
Yeah.
reborn as as a like, free musician. So, and one thing that I can emphasize at the time, I what I realized was that it's if you're studying composition, you know that they study structures, how to build out this piece. There's a complicated processes they employ, like it's be it mathematics or some sort of architecture or language, all kinds of stuff, right? So then I realized that as I was connected to what, in my opinion, what was the uh, core of the essence of hip hop, which I think it's about freedom. So I realized that, especially with NWA, what they were talking about was, police brutality. It's this specific song, "After Police." I'm not sure whether I could swear in this program. Um, and this was before iPhone, before smartphones were around. They were talking about all this stuff, and not only that, they actually had a huge backlash because of that. People were like, destroying their CDs. It was actually not really in thing to do. Like, so now it's that kind of activism is rewarded, but it wasn't like that at all. So I felt like the kind of audacity, the kind of sort of uh, courage was inherently connected to what made it work. So in other words, there has to be this kind of strong desire to express something, and then once you do it, the structure will happen. It will follow. I think Stravinsky said something similar, where like you actually have a river first, which is music, and then the shape of the river is what we study as a form, and other things. So I really felt that. So that changed a lot for me.
I like that you became a student of the music because I think, you know, sometimes people try a style, but if they don't go deeper into it, it's only going to be surface level. It's like a nice thing you'll hear, especially record labels. They'll be like, you should try this, right? And it just crossover because it's been done in one way a lot of times, the classical crossover way. They'll be like, try this, and it's more like something they're putting on rather than something you're really embracing the legacy that has come before. So I love that you really became a student and you went into it. And then the other part of it is what you were saying is like some of the old ideas, right, were brought up classical, and this is the superiority, this is the best kind of music, and to kind of break that down and realize what these other people, there's genius in so many other genres.
Precisely. And I also think that, not to get into this kind of like post-colonial type of studies and
Yeah.
deconstructions and all this basically adversarial activism sort of you know I don't know, these um kind of thinkers. I
Hmm.
don't want to talk about that, because I'm not interested in it at all, because for me, I was always interested in the expression itself and what makes me tick, right? So I really never cared about a lot of sort of um, even push towards like dodecaphony or like serial music or very complicated European avant-garde. I had an aversion to it because I felt like it wasn't really my thing anyways. And first of all, really classical music was new to me when I was in Korea, because for me, Beethoven was very fresh and new. Why? Because simply it was not Korean, right? And it was as new as pop music. It was just a different kind of pop music to me. I know it sounds really weird
Yeah.
for Americans and other Westerners, but it was it was like something new that actually had structure, and I was interested in the structure, so that's why I was connected to Beethoven, connected to Bach, connected to Mozart. And mind you, I love Ligeti. I love some avant-garde composers and some of the composers that are contemporary composers. But I just felt that, this incessant sort of underlying idea that we need to continuously develop and invent language of music, and then somehow that's going to translate into people adapting it. Because mind you, when the second Viennese schools, Schoenberg and his pupils, they were thinking that this 12 tone music will be sung in like everywhere, like it would be adapted by mass audiences, which is crazy, right? So
Hmm.
Kesha or Britney Spears will sing 12-tone melodies. It was insane
Yeah.
kind of idea. I mean, it made sense at the time because at the time there were already 10-tone and 11-tone melodies that are very chromatic. Like it was the end of sort of late romantic chromaticism. Rager's music has already 10-tone melody and so on and so forth. So it makes sense, but it's also very like European. And it's not just European, it's like German because they were building out of Bach. And, Schoenberg thought that he was succeeding Bach, right? And he's creating this like amazing new kind of language that will actually replace counterpoint, right? But French did it differently because what Debussy have done, which created equal amount of problem, even more problem. Like the modernity comes out of French music in some ways, given that I mean, there's debate of it. It's either Tristan chord by Wagner or like it's Debussy. But in my opinion, it's really coming out of Debussy because he was looking at traditions that was not part of European canon. What does that mean? That means that he actually went to Russia and encountered music of Mussorgsky. There's a coronation scene chord that actually sort of is outside of normal chord progression. It destroys all the functions at the time. And when he comes back, he goes to Paris Expo, encountering Gamelan music, and then he's like, I want to make it like that, right? I want to make music sounding like that. And in doing so, he failed to create exact replica, but he actually does something else. So in parallel of that, I mean, Gershwin did similar way. He was trying to sound like jazz, but when you're not improvising, it's not jazz. But it has, chord progressions that are jazz chord progressions with extensions. And once you do that, you don't actually create exact thing that you're trying to recreate. You create something else. So that's a process what we call meta sampling. So in my case, it was the same thing. I had no background in hip hop music. I didn't know any of this subculture. I didn't have any idea of like how to sample things, so on and so forth. But I only knew, you know, counterpoint, orchestration, different kind of harmonies. So using only classical techniques, I tried to make hip hop music. What ended up happening was neither. It's something new. And I compare it with Debussy, compare it with Gershwin, compare it with, to an extent, Nuevo Tango of Astor Piazzolla. But it's really, it's ingrained in American history because Columbus wanted to go to India, right? And then when he came here, it was like psych. It was not India at all. It was America. So
So it's almost like a accidental discovery of this new thing, and it's stated it's not just like that you're mixing two things, but you're creating something new with this hip hop
that's right.
experience.
That's right.
Um, so tell us, obviously, you had this successful moment, and then you said you did start doing recording. When did it move from, I know you both were collaborating, when did it become, the Hip Hop Orchestra Experience? And I know now you have this PBS special, which we'll talk about more.
Mhm.
But when did it become more of that organized production experience, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So that's a lot of it is actually Chris's involvement. Chris is our
Mhm.
executive director and my business partner and longtime friend. So when I first made this, there was at the time the pieces were like one piece was 25 minutes long. Okay. So then there will be introduction, musical introduction, and then there will be a rhyme that doesn't really follow 16 bar song form at all. It would be like, I don't know, 17 bar, and then there's another musical like interlude and another rhyme, and it would just keep going, right? Some sort of weird opera or something like that, but I would replace opera singers with the MCs. And when we actually did this, thinking because Chris liked the idea, like, oh yeah, this is going to totally work. We can maybe like play this at club. And when we did it, people started walking out because it was too weird to them. It was like, okay, why is it too long like this? It's not really like hip hop at all. So what Chris suggested was to actually shrink down the length. It's still long, but it's no longer 25 minutes. One piece is no longer 25 minutes. And we actually kept that first, what we call hip hop. I called it hip hop opera. We kept that music. I'm actually revising it right now for full symphony orchestra and choir. And this is like full, not as big as like Richard Strauss orchestra, but it's like it's got two flutes, two oboe, two clarinet, two bassoons, and four French horn, two trumpets, and three trombones, full strings and percussions, and like 25-piece choir. So it's a big piece. And then we have a drum set that actually drives the rhythm forward. So we kept that, and we're actually developing it into live is nice idea, but we actually wanted to make it into like anime because if there's like a story to it. And to answer your question, not too far out of it, it was incremental. So we have 25 minute a piece weird opera that continues the music like some weird hip hop Wagner. And he's like, okay, no one's gonna listen to this and shrink it down. So now, my impulse is still keep writing substantial pieces. So it's, I guess it's like anywhere from 5 to 9 minutes, sometimes 12 minutes, but it's never 20 minutes anymore. So I would say it was incremental, and it was feedback from the audience. I know, unlike other normal art composers, we would actually test the pieces, and then depending on the reaction, we will actually amend some of it. I'm flexible like that. I'm not like a artiste type.
I think for me, when I first heard about this, I got the email, I wasn't sure what to expect. And then when you're listening to it, I think it's very powerful because first of all, there's something about orchestra music that there's a reason that it scores all these films we love. It's like the community of having an orchestra or a chorus, I think, is very appealing. And then you have that, so you have the emotion of that, and then you have these raw lyrics, not poetry that's coming at you. And
Mhm.
the two of them together, it's so powerful. So is that one of your goals, is kind of like bringing a sense of community and togetherness from people who may not normally even be in a concert venue?
No, that's not my goal at all. That is happening, and I
Okay.
think we welcome it, obviously, and we don't want to, we want to actually have this music enjoyed by everyone. But
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about, oh, we need to have black MC, and then this white girl is going to play the violin. I never thought that way. Okay, so one thing that's interesting about this country is that in my opinion, America is about invention. And I still think that this is very American sort of phenomenon because, let's face it, classical music doesn't work quite like it's working in Europe. And okay, there's great orchestras there, but in Europe, general level of orchestra is higher. I'm not pooping American orchestras at all. I'm just saying generally people are just enthused to go to the concert, first of all, and see,
Sure.
I don't know, Beethoven like 50 times. They're totally fine with this. And then the people, it's sort of like, I don't know how to it's like baseball, right? So, or football. Like Americans will die for football. They don't have that in England. They have
Yeah.
soccer, right? Um, so it's a different kind of commitment, different kind of sort of understanding different kind of government grants and stuff. So, but what's exciting about America is that there's no law. There's no 200-year, like 300-year of like common practice period. You got to wear this wig and then like, some Amadeus guy. There's none of that. If it works, it just happens, which is what I love about America. So I happen to like this idea. I like how it panned out for me. And then it gave me a lot of insights of like how innovations would occur. So if the thing that we emphasize, we call it meta sampling, isn't really a, a way of innovation. So the idea is that we actually, just like I actually thought that I was going to make hip hop music using only classical techniques. Once you actually use only things that are foreign to one system that you're targeting, you're not going to recreate that at all. You're actually going to do something else. So what I realized was that perhaps all innovation works this way. What does that mean? That means that when you actually replace a portion of existing target system, let's say hip hop, like I'm trying to write hip hop music, but then I'm replacing the beat element with, I don't know, fugues and have like orchestral uh, sound, not just sound, but structurally. This is a very different thing that we're doing compared to other hip hop orchestra type acts, which are either legacy acts that are, essentially covering, embellishing the song. They don't really change the song because you don't want to change Dr. Dre's song or a Nas track. No, you don't want to do that because the whole point is to actually go with the legacy thing that people already enjoy, right? Or the other hip hop orchestra people, there are not many, but they're all either sounding like big band covers or live loop. So you're basically playing the violins over and over again, but it's really a beat. So they essentially function as cover band, right? And what we're doing, we accidentally discovered this process. If you actually add something that's foreign in terms of structure, not talking about timbre or instruments, because there are plenty of people that call themselves hip hop violinists, hip hop trombonists, whatever. They don't do anything disruptive in the hip hop form or classical form, right? If you do that, then you're essentially doing covers, and we are not doing that. We're actually either by addition and substitution within the hip hop structure, it changes the form. And that's what we're really interested in, because the problem that we have now I can tell you, I mean, I can talk about other things like politics or state of the derivative movies and IP that's been beaten to death for 5,000 times, and the culture that seems to be repeating itself. If you think about, I don't know whether you watched the sitcom Office, the
Yeah.
funny sitcom Office. If you look at their clothing, that Office was like almost 20 years ago or something. That's a long time ago. But if you look at people's clothing, they look like they could be yesterday, right? But if you look at 80s clothing, 90s clothing, they all had their own 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. There's distinct sort of zeitgeist. We haven't changed for a while. Why is that? Because I think that we have no new ideas. And in our opinion, in order to invent new things, you need to actually do method sampling. And so the position that could be provocative is that all innovation must go through method sampling in order to be born. That's our claim. Obviously, unsubstantiated, but we have it, proofs in our little way, and we created a documentary for it. I don't know whether that answered your question. I'm just rambling now.
No, it did. So it really sounds like you know, the concept, it's an experiment that's ongoing, right? Because you said you're continuing to adjust to once you saw it in the live form, what the audience was doing, reacting, you're continuing to move this forward. One of the lines in this PBS special that you've put out and that we encourage everyone to go and watch and support, one of the lines was talking about a casualness to the performance style, but not to the music. So, can you go a little bit further into what that means?
Yeah, we reject mannerism of any kind, and we also
Mhm.
reject sort of. I know it's a tricky thing to say. Culture is different than methods. We call it methods. Methods are essentially, a portion of principle, or even more simply, you could say pieces of technology. Technology for us, it's not just like, gadgets or app. It's more like how you organize certain system, right? So in in my estimation, culture grows out of technology, and culture is a byproduct that is region specific, historically specific, of course, the racially specific kind of group of people that have practiced that technology. And what is really a technology is a problem solving mechanism, right? So, or creating mechanism. So if you want to, let's say, think about sauerkraut versus kimchi. These are same kind of idea. It's different expression, but it's essentially fermenting veggies, right? The difference would be kimchi has fish sauce in it, and sauerkraut, different spices are there. So in this case, the method would be fermentation. So for us, the idea now to actually get out of this decadence, we call decadence as in everything seems to be repeating without any kind of new development, is to actually break certain current cycle. And we think that method sampling is one of the big ways to do that.
Now let's talk a little bit more about the special because I think it was a very interesting look. Not only did we get to hear you perform, but you got to hear from the performers and some audience members. So, how did that come about?
Uh, yeah, so we finished our method sampling documentary, and then in the process of actually securing our distribution, which we did with Voice of America, so it went worldwide this January, right? And then in the process of that, we met very many people. Like film world was very interesting. It was our first time making a documentary, and then one of the people that we met was a former PBS executive that really taken with our work, and he basically told us, if you have anything else, you should let me know. So we said we could have something else, and so we made this concert special, and then PBS All Arts picked it up. So, and that came
And,
out March of this year. So January release, and then March release. So it's been very rapid.
and that's something that's free to stream online.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more about the hip hop orchestra experience, like I said, for me, it was very powerful to watch the whole thing through. So tell us what are some of the hopes that you would like to do next with this experience.
We would like to make the hip hop opera animation. Um,
Yes.
Ideally, it would be anime because I love Japanese anime. But we we don't mind keeping it in America if somebody's interested in developing it with us. The story is about the end of the world. It's not the end of the world, period. It's end of the world now, like end of the current world, and then beginning of new one. So it's pretty big, sort of uh, topic, and there's a lot of action in it. There's a lot of nudity and violence, a lot of the things that Americans will love. And the music is done, and it's about 2 hours of music. And I am revising some portion of it and orchestrating it for full symphony orchestra with choir from Cynthia.
That'll be very exciting. And I think, I mean, obviously, there's nothing like live music, but there is something special about being able to visualize, especially when there's a story. And I know everything nowadays, they want to do live action, but there is something special about animation. So I hope that does work out.
Thank you. The other thing is like this is what America's good at, right? It's like films and animation. This is I would say the most important art form would be cinema, right? Because it has everything. It's what Wagner called Gesamtkunstwerk. So his music dramas were essentially proto cinema, right? So he put the orchestra in the pit. The music is just like oozing out of somewhere, and then there's like continuous music, right? So it's whole theatrical experience, right? So I'm I feel as more of an American now because I've been living here a really long time. I don't want to give it out because that gives out my age. But I really am excited about this idea. And also, if you think about it, like if Lion King had its own animation and then it became a Broadway show. So if an IP succeeds, you can have a derivative product. And this happens all the time, like Game of Thrones, and then the guy would tour the Game of Thrones, whatever. Game music is like that too. So I think that it could actually spark additional interest in the classical music and classical craft because I really love classical music and I feel like there's a lot to be explored within the system. We don't have to necessarily create new language. We can use our language to actually do something new and exciting that actually works in the real world and then engage the modern audience, regardless of their socioeconomic, racial, whatever, gender, anything. No, it doesn't matter who you are. You can actually bite into this. All these things, I think, is exciting to me. So I'm charging my computer. It was almost going to sleep. So this is exciting because film and animation can actually allow you to do that.
Well, please keep in touch. We'll love to have you on again when you have another project ready. And for everyone, we do encourage you to go out and stream the special. We'll put the links in our bio. Thank you so much, JooWan, for coming on and chatting with me.
Thank you. And you should, if you want to find us, you can either Google Hip-Hop Orchestra and there's some other people that are doing it, but there's only one with the long-haired Asian guy. Or you could Google Hip-Hop Orchestra Experience because it's Hip-Hop Orchestra and it's an experience.
We'll have that information on the screen as well. And like I said, stay in touch. We'll be very excited to see where you go next.
Thank you.